Bienvenidos, señoras y señores, to episode 0 of La Yuma Cubana. Today's episode will serve as a synopsis. So, this was recorded a while ago, and I realize it's the first episode and should have been published a long time ago. However, through this journey and process of having created these other episodes, it's further strengthened the affirmation that this is indeed something that I need to do and that I want to do. So this is just going to give you an understanding of why, because, having been in my respective career for so many years, when I told my friends and family that I'm going to start a podcast on Cuban history, they were just a little bit baffled by that. They're like, yeah, okay, why? What's your motivation? And so this should make it clear. Enjoy. I'm a first-generation Cuban American. I was born and raised in Florida, but with a cultural, seasoned con sazon Cuban upbringing. I'll explain. When I was a child and I would misbehave, my mother had this uncanny ability to throw a chancleta at me, which is like a flip-flop or a sandal. And even when I would turn a corner, this thing would follow me like and just nail me upside the head, defying the very laws of physics. Another example, Vicks Vapor Rub, or Viva Barru, was a common remedy in our household for a wide variety of ailments. What else? Let's see. So when I was a kid, I was very curious, right? And I would, grab the picture frames on the dining table or a vase, anything that was breakable. And my parents would be like, Niña, no toca eso. Don't touch that. Eso caca. I would be appalled. I would be like, whoa, hold up. So you're telling me that the same thing that goes down the toilet is what that is? No Nintendo, mother. I literally thought the world was composed of feces. So we still have family that live in Havana and in the same house that my grandmother was born in. It took me a long time, many years into my adulthood, before I finally decided to go to Cuba and visit. A large part of that was my own ignorance, which fed into my intimidation and fear about going, and also just the fact that my parents were not advocates of the Cuban government. It kind of fed these emotions even more. I was afraid that there would be a food shortage, that I wouldn't have enough to eat if I went there, and that really scared me. And my grandmother told me that you're going to have to bathe out of a bucket. Later on when I went to Thailand and I did that, I realized that it wasn't a very big deal at all. The thing that I was most afraid of was that Fidel would wake up one day with a hair up his butt and say, Nadie se va de aquí. Nobody leaves here. At which point, I would have to go ahead and build a makeshift raft and row my ass back to the States. So, for all these reasons, it took me a long time before I went. And when I finally did go, and I walked through the threshold of that door, there was a mirror on the wall in the living room, and it said, Prima, bienvenido a tu casa. Con mucho amor, tu familia. Which translates into, cousin, welcome to your home, with a lot of love, your family. In pink lipstick, it was written on the mirror. It wasn't printed out. It wasn't like a Hallmark card. It was just like a very creative way of expressing that greeting. So once I started to travel to and fro and learn more about the Cuban culture and my roots, essentially, what surprised me the most was how little each respective culture knew about the other. So when I would come back to the States and I'd ask people, well, what do you know about Cuba? And they'd be like, don't they drive like really old cars and they're like frozen in the 50s? Well, yeah, sort of. So there's definitely 1956 Buicks that have had their transmission completely rebuilt and are miraculously still trucking through the roads of Havana. However, they do get cable out there. They have these little black boxes where they get like Telemundo and the novelas and award shows. So they have a visual as far as what is available here in the States. However, I don't really consider these forms of televised entertainment to be a complete or accurate representation, right? So what is ironic to me is considering the proximity. And yes, I know that there's that little post in Key West that says 90 miles to Cuba, but really that's a nautical measurement that was used many years back by large ships. A more accurate distance would be around 105 miles or 169 kilometers, is the closest point to point between Florida and Cuba. In fact, it's so close that it's swimmable. And Diana Nied, back in 2013, on her 5th attempt at the age of 64, was the first person to do it without the use of a shark cage. Her motto, never ever give up. So you have these two countries that are about a 40-minute flight, right, from Miami to Havana. And they're so blatantly different with respect to socioeconomic standards, to technological advancements, to job opportunities. You have people that have their PhD in mechanical engineering in Cuba that are taking photographs for tourists on the beach just because there's no job in their respective field. And then obviously there's the cultural difference as well. So what I need your help with is to construct a metaphorical bridge for cultural exchange between the United States and Cuba, to offer a platform on which people who live it every day can share their stories about their physical realities and share their perspective on day-to-day life. Compare first world concerns with that of third world ones. Now, those that know me well know that I'm not heavily engaged in social media. However, I do recognize it as a tool in order to propagate information efficiently and exponentially. I am compelled with my entire being to tell these stories, which is why I've created a smorgasbord, if you will, of portals so people can access these recordings through their own medium of personal preference. One thing I noticed when the Obama administration loosened the travel restrictions, that it really piqued the curiosity and it whetted the appetite of Americans to learn more about the Cuban culture and to go visit with an almost sense of urgency. One common concern that I hear is,
so, like, I want to go before McDonald's and Starbucks gets there.
Cuba has been encapsulated and preserved in this bubble of sorts. And it's amazing how limited resources breeds innovation. How the human mind can rig and create in order to address the immediate needs of society. This effort really has a trinity of objectives. Number one, educate. To tell the story, however, not by regurgitating a bunch of facts and dates, but rather I wanted to give you a more intimate version of the story. Number two, entertain. Having the process of learning this be enjoyable. Number three, elevate. If someone hears a personal account and something that individual said inspired them or enhanced their empathy, perhaps something that they said was applicable to their own lives, any point on the spectrum of emotions that we as human beings have the capacity to feel, if that is achieved, then the intention has served its purpose. I'd like to together identify the dichotomy between the States and Cuba, not as a line of segregation, but rather as a point of unification. To be able to respectfully and intelligently analyze the commonalities as well as the differences and see the pros and cons of each. Perhaps reevaluate our own conclusions. I've learned so much that something that I swore was one way, I realized that it was not. And so it's been a very sobering and eye-opening process for me as well. It is with the utmost sincerity and my greatest wish that you will please join me on this journey to delve into a deeper understanding of the dynamic past between the United States and Cuba, and take this newly found knowledge and interconnect it into present day, to strip away the layers of hearsay one by one, and to reach the truth in its most raw form for all to hear. This concludes episode 0 of La Yuma Cubana, the synopsis. Until next time, take care. Cuídate. Ciao.